Hello and welcome to our series on beginning app script for HR, brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions, where we believe knowledge should be shared and in empowering our fellow HR professionals to really rethink how we are delivering our HR services and solutions by utilizing the tools, honestly, that we already have at our disposal. My name is Jay Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions, and in this series, I want to dive in to a beginning guide to Google App Script. This by no means is a promotional campaign for Google over Microsoft over whatever. I chose Google products or Google because, well, for a few reasons really. One is that Google is used by large organizations such as the federal, state level governments, local governments, but it's also used by small to medium sized companies, used by startups, and it has uh, personal products. You can get a Gmail and get documents and sheets or whatever free. And along with those products, regardless of the level, whether it's private or personal, all the way up to enterprise, it comes with something called Google App Script. And what Google App Script allows us to do is interact with any Google product, whether it be a sheet, a document, slide, site, drive, Gmail, whatever. And it also allows us to interact with the web. And Google itself is built in a browser, and it's built with collaboration specifically in mind. So you can share anything with anybody and they can, go in and change stuff. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But having the ability to go in and add on or customize what a sheet or a document or a slide is doing makes Google Apps Script so helpful because you're using something that's embedded and designed to work with Google. Now you can do this with, you can automate obviously with, Microsoft through typically Python, but typically when we think about HR and HR processes, we want to take what it is that we are doing in our function and then give it either to a manager or an employee. So think of all the letters that we write. We write offer letters, we write performance review letters, we even write performance reviews. Managers are constantly doing that. And what we can do is automate all those little transactional pieces that take away and suck our time and keep us from doing what it is that we actually want to do in HR. Now, I know historically the industry, HR industry, we have kind of shied away from coding because it's like, well, that's not our role. That's not what we do. We have developers for that. That's IT. We will hire a consultant or we'll just go out and get an HRIS system off the shelf. If you've ever done an HRIS system off the shelf or an HCM off the shelf, yeah, you get it off the shelf and then you got to configure it. And chances are that configuration is going to be good for 1 to 2 years until your business or employee base evolves. And then you're going to have to reconfigure it or re-automate it. Or chances are you're just not able to get everything it is that you need that product to do in one swoop. Well, with Google Apps Script, if you're using a Google product, you can actually have it do the very thing that you are manually doing all the time. Anything you do in a Google product, you can automate with Google Apps Script. The problem historically with HR, though, us being in HR, we never really learned how to do that. Nobody ever came down. The need wasn't necessarily there. I believe, and I will be the first one, not maybe not the first one, but I know I won't be the last one to tell you this. Our industry is evolving. In order for us to maintain producing the maximum amount of value for our business and our customers, we must also evolve with technology. Yes, coding used to be part of IT, but it's becoming more and more operationally based. And in order for us to provide the solutions that we should be providing, we are going to need to adapt. And hopefully, this series will assist you in beginning that journey. And I know that since this is a video, it's going to appear that I'm talking to you. I would prefer, though, if you did have any questions, any additional pieces, you need assistance with a solution, or you're like, I would love to know more about HTML, please drop us an email. The email is going to be in that comment box, or you just drop it in a comment and let us know. Let us know what it is that you would need, and we will be happy to produce that for you. Whether it's in a video or a document, cheat sheet, or whatnot, because we really want to make sure that HR is evolving with the business industry. So the first thing that we're going to want to do here is let's jump into our code. I have a spreadsheet here open, and what I did was I gave it a name, Beginning App Scripts for HR. I changed the title of a tab. Instead of that sheet 1 thing, I gave it records. And I put a name simply in cell B3. Now, this is just a starting point, but ultimately, I would like this to be populated with an entire employee database, which I can randomly do. And then I want to be able to actually interact with that database. I want to be able to do whatever it is that I need to do, except I don't want to have to manually do that. And I think that's a barrier that we run into. It's like, I just don't want to manually do that all the time. Who has time for that? Once you create the code the first time, you will then have time to do everything else because the code will be doing it, not you, which is, trust me, it is phenomenal. So to first start opening up our Google Apps Script, what we do is we come up here to our menu bar. Now I know we've used file, things like format, data, insert, of course, but where we're looking is this extensions piece right here. When you click on extensions, you'll have add-ons. We're not looking at add-ons, but you should see app script. If you don't see app script, you can go over to the waffle if you're using Chrome over there by your name and open it that way, the same way you would open up like Sheets or something. Or you can simply just do an internet search on it and pull it up. It'll take you to the same place. But what we want to do is click on app script. And what that would do is that will open up our app script project page. And the first thing that we would like to do when this page is open is give our project a name. I like naming my project the same thing that it's attached to. Since this script is attached to our spreadsheet, I name it the same exact thing. And I'm not going to get too in depth about the types of code. And what I mean by the types is we have bound and standalone. The one thing that we just need to know is that since we opened it from a sheet, or if we opened it from a doc or whatever it is, that this script is bound to that sheet. If you delete the sheet, you delete the code. If you share or somebody copies the sheet, the code goes with it. Standalone, it's just by itself. It's not attached to anything. It interacts, but it's just not attached. So now with Google, what they do is they give you starter templates. And they've created a file. It's always defaulted called code.gs. GS stands for Google Apps Script, so we'll leave that for now. That's fine. And then it gives you a template function. If you've used JavaScript or been exposed to JavaScript, AppScript is highly similar, and that's because it's web-based as well, or browser-based. And the way we declare a function, we declare it by typing the word function in here. And then we have to give our function a name. And that's what this my function is. Now we can name it anything we want. but with certain restrictions. But you'll notice that my function is not written the way we would typically write a function. The first letter of the first word is lowercase. First letter of the second word is uppercase. This is called camel case, and it serves various purposes. But for now, the benefits that I want to point out is it helps with readability of the function name, and upper letters or uppercase first letters are typically reserved for built-in tools, best way to put it, for Google Apps Script. And we'll see that in a second. And you'll notice that when you typed in uppercase, it turned this pink color. So you always want to use camel case. That is kind of a standard practice across all coding languages. When you're naming a function, you cannot start it with a number. You notice when you start it with a number, you get the little squirrely lines. And even if you tried to save it, you would come up with a syntax error. So you never start it with a number. And the other thing is if you ever need to do a space in the name, you just can't hit space, because what ends up happening is it separates those two elements, those two words in this case. So it thinks that this is one and this is another one. If you need to do a space, you can do an underscore and it works just fine. So let's give our function a name. What we would like to do is write a code, a block of instructions. That's what a function is. It's a set of instructions. And what we want to tell Google is to use the Google spreadsheet or Google Sheet app, which is Google Sheets. Go to this spreadsheet, this tab, and grab this cell's value. So that's all we want our function to do. And when we're writing code, our function needs to be as basic as possible. So we need to start off at the very beginning. And what I mean by that is, well, let's just jump in and it'll be clear as to what I'm meaning. So we need to first tell Google that we are trying to use our Google Sheet app. We're not working in a doc, we're not working in a slide, we're working in a spreadsheet. So to do that, we begin typing spreadsheet, and you'll see that the first one up here is a spreadsheet app. That's what we want. You'll see that it is uppercase because it's built in. If we were working on slides, we'd pick this one. A Data Studio, we'd pick that one. But since it was highlighted, we can hit tab. It saves you on having to type it all out. And just like how we write instructions, when we get done with an instruction, we end it. Anytime that we end a concept of an instruction, we end it with a period. So the first thing we wanted to do was tell Google that we're using a spreadsheet app. We're using Google Sheets, period, or dot. Then what we want to tell Google is we want to get the active spreadsheet, whichever one it is that we're working on. Since this is bound, we can just get that active spreadsheet, the one that is open. You get active spreadsheet, which is right here. Now you can finish typing this out, but sometimes it's easier just to highlight it. And you'll notice that get active spreadsheet has this method in parentheses. So the method is a terminology. I won't get into the method, but the one thing that I want to point out is these parentheses are a hint. That means that anytime you have the name with this method in here, it requires parentheses. And when you include the parentheses, it gives you an extra set of instructions. We are only working with one active spreadsheet, so we don't need anything in the parentheses. So now we have the spreadsheet app, and Google's eyes are on the active spreadsheet. Now we need to get the tab, that specific sheet that we're on. So our tab's name is records. So to get the tab, the specific sheet, we can type in get sheet, and you'll notice that we have get sheet by name. Now, sheet ID or get sheet by ID, that is within the URL. We don't want that. What we want is just the tab. We can either do get sheet by name or get sheet name. If we told Google to get sheet name, all we would essentially do is ask Google to give us the name of that tab. We don't want that. What we want is to get it by that name. And as you look, it's also a method, so it's going to require these parentheses. And when you type in the parentheses on this one, it tells you, opens up a whole lot of information here. And a lot of this is jargon. And unless you know what all this means, it's just going to look, it's just going to confuse you. So what I typically focus on is this header piece up here. And the reason I focus on this is it tells you what is required inside those parentheses in what way. So it wants the name of the sheet, which is the tab, and it wants that in the form of a string. Now, string is text. Easiest way to think about string is it's just text. Anytime you have string or text in code, it needs to be in quotation marks. So our sheet name is records. And you'll notice that I used capital R because records is not the same thing as lowercase records. These are, according to Google Apps Script, these are two entirely different things. If we were to run this, it wouldn't know where to go because we do not have a sheet tab name with a lowercase r. So when you're referring to things, it must be exactly how it is written. If you misspelled it in tab, it's got to be misspelled when you reference it or fix it. Now we can end that line of instructions, and the way we end a line of instructions is with a semicolon. Anytime you have a semicolon, it's telling Google Apps Script that this is the end of this line of instructions, and anything else is a different set of instructions. Now, if we were to do something else with this, and then we wanted to do something completely different with this, we would have to write this all over again. Except with Google Apps Script and JavaScript, what we can do is declare a variable. And what a variable is it is a term that stores a line of instructions. So all of this can be stored in one word of whatever word it is that we decide. So let's declare a variable. And we declare a variable a few different ways, but we're going to use one way. We'll call this let. And we want our variable to be descriptive of what it is. And we want that equal to that line of instructions. So this let is declaring a variable called sheet. And anytime we use this word, sheet, it is telling Google that we are wanting this. Now, the great thing is it's not every time we call sheet, it's not running this, because what's happening is it's running this and taking this concept, data, or instructions and storing it in sheet. It's not getting rid of it, it's storing it. So this is stored now in this variable. So now what we can do to this sheet, now that we have the focus on the record sheet, is we want to get the value of this cell. So when Google Apps Script thinks of cells, I know we typically think B3, and Apps Script can think of it that way as well. But when we're really digging into data, it's nice to drill in to, especially when we're dealing with a lot of data, we want to give it a starting point and an ending point, because maybe we don't need the entire 40 column row of, or columns and rows of data. We just need a specific amount of cells. And this is called a range. So one cell is a range and a group of cell is a range. So when we're looking at Anna, yes, it's at B3, but for our purposes, we want it to be row 3, column 2. 1, 2. So that'll give us that cell, and then we want the value of that cell. So we can get that by coming back over to our script, and let's create another variable. Let's store that in a variable, and let's call that variable data, and let's make data equal to, well, we don't have to call that, we don't have to type this anymore, because remember, we stored that in a variable here, so we can just simply refer to that variable, and we want to get a range. We want to get that cell. So we can start simply by typing get range, and that is a method, so it's going to take the parentheses. Once we type the parentheses, it'll tell us what it is that it needs. First, it needs the row in the form of an integer. Well, we know that the row was 3, going over here, row 3, column 2. And then it was asking for this comma here, and then it wants the column and the integer in an integer form, which was 2. And now it needs to know what it is that we want to do with it. If we were to just simply end this line here, then this data variable would simply be telling Google, hey, look at that range. Don't do anything with it, just look at it. But what we want is to get the value of it. Since it's only one cell, we only need to .get value. If it was multiple cells, we would need the plural version of that. But since it's just one, we need value. And that was a method for parentheses. So now we're taking that value, which is Anna, and we're storing it in this variable. Now, we haven't told Google Apps Script that we want to see it. It's just until we tell it we want to see it, it's not going to show us. So how we can see our data and what is actually occurring or what's inside this variable here is we can type in logger log. You'll see that that's a method. And this method, what we're wanting to see is what's ever inside that variable, whatever that variable is storing, which is all this, which is the value. So we can simply just refer to that variable. Now let's save this and see what we got. So when we save this, my function, let's change the name to my function to something more descriptive. Since we're pulling data from a sheet, let's just say pull sheet data. There we go. That way we can get off of my function. Now you notice that my function's still up here in this drop down. This name is not going to appear until we save it. As you can see, now it's available. So what we want to do is we want to run this. Now Google is a company. Google is an enterprise. So they're not going to be responsible for whoever does what using their product. So there's going to be a series of prompts that we have to go through in order to run our code. Because yes, there are people out there who code and then embed things in, apps or something that are sold or available through their app store. And Google doesn't want to be responsible for that, so to speak. So there's a lot of prompts, and you'll see them once you hit run. When you hit run, we have to authorize this script. And what we're doing in this step is essentially sharing our spreadsheet with our script. So let's hit review permissions. And then we have to sign in. Now you'll get a bunch of the scary terminology. So this terminology here is essentially saying, is requesting access to sensitive info in your Google account. Well, the app, we know exactly what the app's doing because we are only, essentially, we're the ones who created it, and it's only going to that tab getting the value of that sheet. Until the developer verifies, which is us, verifies this app with Google, you shouldn't use it. So that is Google's way of saying we are not responsible for anything, which is fine. It's a company they shouldn't be verified, and we're not going to verify this with Google because we are only using it internally. We're not selling it, and we're not saying, here, Google, promote this. So that's fine. Now, we don't want to hit click back to safety, because if we hit back to safety, what that's going to do is that's going to send it back to, it's going to close this box here, and it's going to take us back here, and we're not going to be able to use our code. What we want to do is go over here and click advanced. And then, of course, it says continue only if you understand the risks and trust the developer. Well, we trust ourselves and we know exactly what our code is doing. It's not doing anything else. And you can go to beginning script apps for HR. And then it says it's unsafe because we can't verify it, which again is fine because we know exactly what's going on. And then when you click that, you'll get something that looks a lot like an app. This will allow see, create, edit, delete all. Now it says delete all your Google spreadsheets. Now, this is some pretty scary language, but it's only saying that because it doesn't know what your code is. Our code isn't doing any of that. We don't want it to do any of that. It's simply getting that record. So again, this is just a lot of the scary language. This is just a lot of the scary language that they have. It's sort of protecting Google, which is fine. And then what we want to do is allow. When we allow it, then it'll go back and run the code. Now we only have to do that once. That's it, just one time, unless we create something that does something, different. But typically that's what that authorization is. And as you can see, it's pulling Anna. Now if we go back over to this spreadsheet and type in Joe, and then run that script again, you'll see that it's pulling that. So this is during this video here, I'm going to end it here. During this video, we pulled one cell. And we know that working with HR, there's quite a bit of cells. So we're going to have Anna, Joe, Jake, Sarah, and then we have maybe, I don't know, ages, what have you, two. Maybe not ages. I don't know, maybe we're starting early, trying to get that employee base set. We need multiple lines of data in order to do something with. And the next video, instead of taking one, we're going to jump in and take a series. We're going to take a whole line of row. We're going to take a big bulk. And instead of using get value, we'll use get values and then pull that. But it won't come to us as a single entity. It'll come to us in what's called an array. And that'll be the topic of the next video, is how to pull multiple data and how to interact with arrays and then write data back to that sheet. So if you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. If you would like more information or you have a solution that you would like to discuss or whatever, please use that email in our comment section. And until next time, please take care.